It's Friday night. It's the preview show. It's the No Nay Never podcast.
Hello and welcome to the preview show brought to you by the No Nay Never podcast. And it is, listeners, take 3. I'm your host, Natalie Bromley, and joining me is the main man himself, the headliner of the preview show, and it is Dave Statman Roberts. Dave, third time's a charm, is that the expression?
Hopefully, yeah. We're fingers crossed the game's going to be on this Saturday. We did record the first one in December. That was obviously called off at the last minute. And then we were kind of wise, weren't we, with the second one? We weren't going to be caught out. We delayed. And eventually we were proved right because we hadn't recorded the second time.
Yeah, correct. We were pretty wary at that point. So it came just after which game was it that got called off? The Villa one, was it? Whichever game it was. Leicester. No, it was Leicester, wasn't it?
Yes.
So, yeah, we were pretty wise to that. We didn't bother recording. So we have one. We now are pretty confident that we are going to get a game this weekend. And we are here, of course, to bring you all the news and stats and prep for that match. Before we dive into that, and actually one quick thing, Dave, that I'm going to say. This is the first time our listeners have heard from us since the 31st of January. I am declaring this previous show a transfer deadline day free zone. We're not going to talk about it yet. We'll dissect it later, but tonight it's all about Watford, okay? So it's a free zone. So we're going to go straight into the small matter of a quiz question. Many, many moons ago, however long it was now, we set our listeners, actually that was which preview show? Arsenal, of course it was. Before the Arsenal preview show, we asked you the following question. Chris Wood had a bit of a reputation for being offside, but how many times was he flagged offside in Premier League games during his time at Burnley? Dave, you little scamp, that was both difficult and quite amusing in equal measures. Well done you. Why don't you tell our listeners what the correct answer was and whether we had any correct guesses?
Well, yeah, first of all, the correct answer was 156, which is just over one offside per game on average, which is perhaps lower than you might think. But we did widen it out.
Perhaps, yeah.
We did widen it out, and we posted the question in our weekly newsletter and also on Twitter. And although there was a vast range of guesses from 3, thanks Tom Whittaker, to, quote, a number so vast that even deep thought can't work it out. And another one with lots and lots of 9s going through in the full range of characters that Twitter allows. But remarkably, some of the answers were quite close. And in fact, we received 3 replies from people who got the answer spot on. All were from Twitter. Claret John, who is Claret Longside. George, who is Wilkin Songbird, and also Michael Strutt, who is Strutt76. They all replied with the correct answer. Were these just lucky guesses, and we did have around over 70 of them, or were some search engine skills involved? We'll leave you to decide.
We do not tolerate search engine abuse on this show. John Robertson, are you listening? In fact, that's probably, I'm amazed that John Robertson didn't submit a correct answer, actually, because he's his prime Google world. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he felt guilty. Actually, a quick point, actually. Now, I'm going to do a quick rally cry here. John Robertson sent us an email through his VIP channel that we have for him, hilariously, this week with a really, really great idea for some future episodes of the podcast. And it just did make me think that just the information that listeners send to us that they want to hear and see and stuff you want us to cover is always utterly brilliant. So keep them coming. Be like John Robertson. Drop us an email. You know the drill. You know how to get in touch with us and send us some ideas of anything that you want to see on either the preview show or on the analysis show. We are here to listen. There will be another quiz question for you at the end of this episode, so do not fret. You do not have to wait very long to be challenged once again. You just need to stick around. So hang fire till the end of the show, and Dave will be giving you this week's quiz question.
Premier League head-to-head.
So let's move on to the actual preview show itself. Why we are here, Dave. We are, of course, looking ahead to the rearranged Strike 3 fixture of Watford at home. It's on Saturday the 5th of February and it's a 6 p.m. kickoff live on BT Sport. We are going to dive straight into the history of this fixture, Dave. So why don't you kick us off with all of the recent Premier League meetings?
Yeah, well, 21-22 this season is the 5th season that our paths have met in the top flight in the Premier League era. In the past 4 matches at Turf Moor, Burnley have won 3 times and lost just once. Watford's only win out of the 4 was by a 3-1 scoreline. In that match in August 2018, ex-Claret striker Andre Gray gave the Hornets an early lead before James Tarkowski hit back with a quick-fire equaliser. However, second-half goals from Troy Deeney and Will Hughes ensured the visitors went away with all 3 points. We'll mention our 2 1-0 wins now, and we'll keep the 2-0 win back for our memory match. So those 2 wins by a single goal margin were in December 2017, when Scott Arfield scored just before half-time, not long after Watford's Marvin Ziegler had been sent off. And in June 2020, it was Jay Rodriguez who found the net with a second-half header in a match that was played behind closed doors. Of course, we didn't meet last season as Watford was spending a season back in the Championship before bouncing back at the first attempt.
Indeed.
Memory match!
What have you picked for a specific memory match then, please?
Okay, yeah, for our memory match, let's return to that 2-0 Burnley win, which took place early on in the 2016-17 season. Burnley were without striker Andre Gray, who was beginning a 4-match ban for historical comments made on social media. We took the lead in the 38th minute after Stephen Defoe's corner was headed down by Jeff Hendrick and went through the legs of Sam Vokes and in past Watford goalkeeper Aurelio Gomez. 5 minutes after half-time, we found the net again with another header. This time, Stephen Defoe's left-wing cross found Michael Keane, who directed a header in at the B-hole end to double our advantage, and it stayed that way to give us a well-deserved victory. Stephen Defoe was man of the match, and the victory took us up to 13th in the table on 7 points after 6 games.
Good stuff. I always forget sometimes that Keane was a Claret. I did like him. Poor lad. He needs to come back, actually. It's all going wrong for him at Everton. Let's have him back.
On this day!
On this day, then, what's happened on this particular date in previous years?
Well, there have been 6 past Burnley wins on the 5th of February. So let's take you through some of the most memorable moments on this date in years past. It actually started off rather badly with a 7-0 defeat against Preston North End at Deepdale. Future Burnley manager Jimmy Ross scored a second-half hat-trick for the Lily-Whites. That was a match that took place in 1891. 7 years later, in 1898, Jimmy Ross was playing for Burnley and scored one of the goals in a 4-1 home win over Small Heath, who would later be renamed as Birmingham City, as the Clarets topped the second division table. In 1910, we suffered a cup upset, losing 2-0 away to non-league Swindon Town, who were playing in the Southern League at the time. But things did start to improve. In 1921, Burnley beat Aston Villa 7-1 at Turf Moor during the record-breaking run of 30 league matches unbeaten. Joe Anderson scored 5 of Burnley's goals in that match. In 1927, Jack Bruton scored the only goal as we beat Manchester United in a 1-0 home win. And in 1930, we came from behind to beat Aston Villa 2-1 at Villa Park. There was just one more match on this date before the Second World War, and that was a 3-1 defeat at Luton Town. Between 1945 and 1999, there were 7 Burnley matches on the 5th of February. All of them were away from Turf Moor, and we didn't win any of them. There were 6 draws during this period. First 3 were against Birmingham City in 1949, West Brom in 1955 and Arsenal in 1966, before we lost 2-0 at Luton Town in 1977. The other 3 draws were all 1-1 scorelines, at Rotherham United in 1983, at Swansea City on a Friday evening in 1993, and then at Huddersfield Town in 1994. In the new millennium, there have been just 3 previous matches on the 5th of February. The first of those was a memorable match against Bristol Rovers at Turf Moor in the year 2000. After the sending off of Andy Payton, Glenn Little scored a wonderful solo goal as 10-man Burnley beat Bristol Rovers. 1-0. We then lost 1-0 at home to Leeds United in 2005. Frank Sinclair was sent off and Ian Moore failed to convert a late penalty, which would have earned us a point. And finally, in 2011, we beat Norwich City at Turf Moor with goals from Dean Marney and the winner from Jay Rodriguez. So to summarise, our overall record for 5th of February is played 17, won 6, drawn 6 and lost 5, with 24 goals for and 25 against.
I like that record. That's not bad.
Club Connection!
Well, we've been bringing you the Club Connection section on the preview show this season, where we look at the players who have spent time with both clubs. Who are we going to focus on this week, Dave, please?
Well, way back in December, we tweeted out a list of players to see which names would come back in our replies. But there wasn't really one name which gained any momentum and stood out, with several individuals, including Micah Hyde, Jerry Harrison, Gifton Noel-Williams, and even Alexander Kaklaniklic getting a mention. So we singled out the player who was mentioned by Todd Claret, thanks Andrew, and that was Clark Carlisle. Who can forget that day at Wembley and his emotional interview after Burnley had beaten Sheffield United to reach the promised land of the Premier League?
I feel like we've covered this point before, Dave. I think was it the Sheffield United preview show maybe where you said what's your best memory or something, and I said it had to be Carlisle's Oscar speech at Wembley. Look at this magnificent crowd. Look at these fans. It was absolutely brilliant. I have got so much time for Clark Carlisle, and I think he's a wonderful, wonderful individual. But yeah, I'm pretty sure we've covered this before. But anyway, sorry, I wanted to jump in there. Do tell us all about Clark Carlisle, Dave.
Yeah, well, Clark Carlisle was born in Preston in 1979 and started his footballing career with Blackpool. By the time he joined Watford in 2005, he'd also spent time with QPR and Leeds United, and would also have a short loan spell at Luton before Burnley made a move for the experienced central defender in 2007, while Steve Cottrell was still our manager. But it was under Owen Coyle where we saw the best of Clark Carlisle, in partnership with captain Steve Caldwell, including that memorable 2008-2009 season which ended with victory at Wembley against Sheffield United. Clark was clearly very emotional when interviewed after the final whistle, weren't we all? But it meant that he would be playing top-flight football with Burnley the following season. He played 27 of the 38 games in the Premier League in 2009-10 and was a regular again the following season after we dropped straight back into the Championship. But after extended loan spell with Preston and Northampton in 2011-12, he moved on for a short spell with York City before ending his playing career with Northampton. In total, he made 152 appearances for Burnley, scoring 8 goals. During his time at Burnley, he was the chairman of the PFA and also appeared on TV quiz programme Countdown and as a panellist on the BBC's Question Time programme. But he also had his off-the-field battles with his mental health, and after being very frank about an earlier attempt to take his own life when he was only 21 in his book and a TV documentary, there were more concerns in December 2014, when he also, thankfully, survived an incident with a lorry as a pedestrian on the A64 near York. 3 years later, there were more concerns when he went missing, before being found safe, and we can only hope that Clark is coping with his personal demons now. However, he'll always be fondly remembered for the time he spent at Turf Moor, which culminated in that most memorable of matches at Wembley in May 2009.
Indeed, he will always be very special to Burnley fans and a fantastic advocate for mental health as well. And he's been unbelievably brave to come out and tell his story and basically raise awareness for the challenges that people with mental health difficulties face. And yeah, you're right. We do always wish that he is in a really good place and feeling well and just enjoying life.
Scouting report!
That's the end of the first half of the preview show. So we now need to go into the second half where we look to kick off with our scouting report, because this is, of course, the present. Dave, scouting report, kick us off.
Yeah, well, it's perhaps not a surprise, certainly to anyone who's been paying attention for the last decade, but Watford are already onto their third manager of the season. Despite getting the Hornets promoted last season, a Spaniard, Cisco Munoz, was sacked in October to make way for an Italian, Claudio Ranieri, who in turn was sacked just last month with veteran 74-year-old former England manager Roy Hodgson coming out of retirement for one last job. Watford's summer transfer outlay of just over £20 million included 22-year-old central midfielder Imran Louza, 22-year-old goalkeeper Maduka Okoye, 23-year-old Nigerian striker Emmanuel Dennis, who was a bargain £3.6 million buy from Club Bruges, and 32-year-old midfielder Musa Sissoko, who arrived from Spurs. They spent a further £20 million or so on 6 more players in the winter window, suggesting that their scattergun approach to recruitment isn't just limited to managers. Watford haven't played since the appointment of Roy Hodgson, so we can't read too much into likely formations for Saturday, as there may be a different approach to his predecessors, particularly in defence. Since mid-December, Watford's issues with COVID have eased, but they still have several players out injured. But they are able to welcome back the likes of Imran Louza, Adam Messina and William Truce Ekong after their participation in the African Cup of Nations. However, their current injury list includes Nicholas Nkulu, Peter Etobo and Kwadwo Bar. Despite some controversy over his fitness, which led to Watford initially trying to block his involvement at AFCON, Ismaila Sarr is still there with Senegal, who've reached the final. For a player who the club did not think was fit enough to be released, he hasn't done badly, and came off the bench in the last 2 matches and even scored against Equatorial Guinea in the quarter-final. Emmanuel Dennis is currently Watford's top goal scorer with 8, although he's unavailable due to a suspension for being sent off in their last match against Norwich City. Josh King and Ismaila Sarr have each contributed 5 goals so far this season, and this trio are also the club's top 3 contributors in terms of FPL points so far this season. But as mentioned already, only one of them, Josh King, will be available to play this Saturday.
Well, you've heard our thoughts about our visitors, but for balance, we do also like to bring you the thoughts of our opposition. And this week, we spoke to the Watford podcast From The Rookery End, as Jason Bailey has recorded this week's opposition view.
Opposition view!
Hi, it's Jason from the Watford podcast From The Rookery End. Looking forward to heading into this Burnley game at the third time of asking. And of course, Watford being Watford, we're going into it with a new manager. So how am I feeling heading into this game? Well, actually, I'm feeling stupidly optimistic, which is a bit unusual given that we haven't won since we beat Manchester United 4-1 early on in Claudio Ranieri's reign. And since then, it's been a bit of a tough watch. We had a difficult run of games and we did sort of hold our own against the bigger sides, but then we've come up against teams that we should have performed better against, and the performances and the results have been disappointing, bar a late equaliser at Newcastle where we managed to pick up a well-deserved point. It's been hard, it's been tough, and I say I'm coming into this game feeling optimistic, and I think it's the unknown. It's the fact that we've got a new man at the helm. He's going to try something different. He's going to hopefully give us a bit of a new manager bounce. I went into Claudio's last game at home to Norwich. You'd think there's a great opportunity for 3 points. I did go into it feeling cautious, not sure what to expect, seeing the sort of recent performances against other teams we should have beaten. And yeah, first goal was important. Norwich got it and heads dropped from there. And it was, by the end, a real tough watch. And I think we're all ready to go home. But as the Potsos do, they've taken action. Claudio's gone, Roy's in, bringing Ray Lewington back to Watford with him as well. A well-loved man who fans are delighted to see him back. And I think that adds to the optimism, certainly from my point of view, seeing him back at the club. We've not kept a clean sheet all season in the Premier League, and you know that will be Roy's first task, to try and do something there, try and make us solid, try and make us hard to beat, and that fits in with his style of game. We know at Palace he sort of played a 4-4-2 low block style of game, counter-attack, and it'll be interesting to see in the Burnley game, because I guess that's a sort of Dyche's preferred setup as well. Will it be a sort of quite a cautious game, a chess match cliche type of game? We shall see. Will be interesting to see not only how we perform defensively, but how we get our attacking players into the game if we go with that setup. We've got some exciting talent there, albeit they've sort of dipped in form recently. Emmanuel Dennis has been a revelation this season, has been great to watch, produced some nice little moments of skill, but has also contributed with a lot of goals and assists as well. His form has dipped recently, but it'll be good to see him back on song and hopefully causing Burnley problems. Obviously, we'll need to deal with the attacking threats that Burnley have, most notably the new signing, Weghorst. As I said, our defence hasn't been great this season, and if you've got a big man up there ready to bully our back four, perhaps that does worry me slightly. But, a couple of weeks ago we came up a guy by the name of Chris Wood who we expected to do the same to us, and we kept him pretty quiet. So if we can do that against him, hopefully we can do the same against Weghorst. Don't know how you guys will feel about him, who's actually going to be the better of the two. Guess that remains to be seen, but hopefully we can keep him quiet as we did with Newcastle. So I guess we'll finish with a prediction. I'm always on the pessimistic side when it comes to predicting Watford games. We never do well in the Northwest. Burnley, always a tough place to go, but I'm going to try and be a little bit positive. I will go for a 1-1 draw. May the best team win. No, actually, come on, Watford.
From the Rookery End. They have been friends of the No Nay Never podcast for a very long time, and they produced amazing content. So if you are looking for just general sporting podcasts, do check out their content, because they are fantastic advocates for fan-led material and just, they're just really great. So do check them out. Just before we go on to our thoughts ahead of the game, and Dave, who is going to be refereeing?
We've got Craig Pawson of Sheffield. He's scheduled to take charge of this rearranged match. Although he'd been appointed for the postponed fixture last month, it was actually Martin Atkinson who'd been due to be in the middle for the original game in December. Burnley have only won 4 of our previous 16 matches that Craig Pawson has refereed, and it's been a little while since he's taken charge of one of our matches, with just one game in 2019-20 and one in 2020/21, both of which were draws. Those are both away games, Aston Villa and Wolves respectively. In terms of sendings off, there have been quite a few. There's been 5. In all 5 cases, they were opposition players. He reduced Brighton to 9 men in the first 12 minutes at the Amex in 2011, as Romain Vincelot and also Ashley Barnes both saw red. Burnley won that match 1-0 with a Kieran Trippier goal. He also sent off Blackburn Rovers player Lee Williamson for a professional foul in a 1-1 draw at Turf Moor in 2013. He brought Danny Ings down late on as he was clean through. And he was also the referee who sent off Gary Cahill and Cesc Fabregas for Chelsea as Burnley won 3-2 on a memorable afternoon at Stamford Bridge on the opening day of the 2017-18 season. Finally, for this section, Chris Kavanagh will once again be the video assistant referee.
Excellent stuff.
Statman Dave's Stat of the Week.
Well, I know you don't want to leave it there, Dave, because I know you like to treat our listeners. So why don't you delve deep into those pockets of yours and let our listeners have your miscellaneous Stat of the Week.
We said we weren't going to talk about transfers and signings, but this does relate to that. Sorry. We are all hoping that Burnley's brand new signing, Dutch striker Wout Weghorst, will be in the starting 11 on Saturday. If he does play, then recent history is against him in terms of the likelihood that he will score a goal in his debut. So far, 70 different players have been given their debut by Sean Dyche since he took over as Burnley manager in 2012. And only one of those 70 players has managed to score a goal on their debut. That player was Mate Vidra, who came on as a substitute and scored Burnley's goal in the 1-1 draw against Olympiacos at Turf Moor in August 2018, although it wasn't enough and we were defeated 4-2 on aggregate.
That's all right. That's not a bad transfer mention. I'm all right with that. It's just the rest of it that we're going to keep quiet. So how are you feeling about the game? Surely, Dave, this is the one where you can finally say it's a must-win game.
No.
Oh, Dave, come on. How is this not a must-win game?
Because if we lose it, we're not down, are we?
Richard, yes. I'm gonna say yes, sir. I'm gonna say if we lose at home against Watford on Saturday, we are down. We are running out, despite having 455 million games in the bank as postponements and rearranged fixtures. We are running out of winnable games, and we are going to need to get probably at least 7 wins before now and the end of the season. And if you're not going to win at home to Watford, what, are we just going to go and win at home against United instead? It's
Probably.
But and also we've talked about this before, Dave. It's more important if we only win one of the next 2 games. It's far more important to win at home.
Agreed. Yes, very much so.
Yeah. So this is a must-win for me. I believe we've got some injury problems again.
Well, yeah, 1 or 2 that we know about. Obviously, Josh Brownhill is suspended. He picked up 5 yellow cards, so he's not available. Ashley Barnes is still coming back from his injury. He actually played 45 minutes to the under-23s today. He scored a header, I think, from a corner just before half-time and then came off at half-time. He just played the 45 minutes. So he's certainly not going to be starting on Saturday. I guess there might be a possibility they might consider putting him on the bench in terms of having a late cameo role as a sub, but I'd be surprised. I think he might want another game before he gets back into the main match day squad. In terms of other injuries, we know that Charlie Taylor had an ankle injury, so he's doubtful. Mate Vidra's had his hernia up now, so he's not going to be playing. And also JBG, he's had appendicitis, so that's he's coming back from that in a few weeks. So we've got a few problems from that respect. We've also got Maxwell Cornet coming back from AFCON. He didn't arrive back until Wednesday, we believe, according to the press conference that happened on Thursday. But you'd hope that he's certainly going to be involved in some way, and you'd hope that he's going to be okay to start. I think if we can get him starting with Wout up front as well, then that's going to give us a bit of impetus and give Watford something to think about. So, yeah, we have got 1 or 2 problems. We don't have COVID problems now, but we have still injury problems, and we don't have the deepest of squads. And as we mentioned briefly, we didn't really bring, other than replacing one for another, Chris Wood being replaced by Wout Weghorst, we didn't bring any other recruits in. So, from that, in that respect, we are struggling a little bit, particularly with the injuries we've got.
Yeah, if only we'd have just had a whole month to be able to bring in reinforcements, Dave. If only. So is that how? Listeners, I struggle with the old pronunciation. Is that how we're pronouncing it? Wout Weghorst.
Yes.
Wout Weghorst. You're going to have to start spelling that phonetically in our script, I think, Dave. Otherwise, I'm going to start embarrassing myself. Give me a score prediction then, please.
I'm going to go for a Burnley win, and I'm going to go because Watford don't keep clean sheets.
Nope. Don't jinx it.
Is it how many games? There's some. I should have had that stat of the week. They've had something like each manager. The last 5 clean sheets have all been with different managers or something. It's been that. Well, they've changed manager every other week, don't they?
So say that's not that impressive a stat, to be honest.
I'm going to go for a 2-1 Burnley win, and I'm going to go for a debut goal for Wout and Maxwell Cornet getting the other.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to go for a 3-0 Burnley win. I think we're feeling positive. I am going to also go with a Wout. I've already forgotten Wout. A Wout debut header. I'm going to go with a Maxwell sensational volley from about 50 yards out. And I'm going to go with a Ben Mee header. Of course, I'm going to go with a Ben Mee header. I think it's going to be an absolute rout. I think they'll be spurred on by the point they got at Arsenal. I think they will be spurred on with a full turf moor that's absolutely rocking. And I think that these players are still absolutely furious with that turncoat who's gone to Newcastle and will just make a good effort to try and win. So, listeners, you know the drill by now. Get in touch with us and let us know your score prediction. We want a scorer, and how they scored, please. Some of the suggestions that come through our email are utterly hilarious. You can tweet us at NoNayNever. You can leave a comment on our Facebook page, or you can email us at our special email address, which is previewshow@nonaynever.net. I think that's it for the game. Shall we move on to some Fantasy Premier League, Dave?
Yes, let's do that.
Fantasy Premier League update.
Okay, and then here we are then. At this point in the show, we usually bring you the FPL League updates. But actually, the tables won't be updated until after Saturday's fixture, which is the final match of game week 23. Although that's in February, we are assuming that it will also count in January's manager of the month. So do bear with us with that. We'll get Statman Dave to try and figure out what the rules are, and we will confirm that in a later podcast. So instead, we decided this week that we were going to bring you some insight in terms of FPL tactics and strategy. So we caught up with a friend of the show, Jason McKenna, to see if he could provide some helpful advice to our FPL managers. Now, savvy listeners will remember that Jason was on the show not that long ago, and we of course recorded that on that same night. So I'm going to leave it here. The producer Matt's going to pick up the soundbite, drop it in after our little segment here, and you can listen to what we talked about when we recorded that Arsenal preview show with young Jason. Well, listeners, you know that we do like to give you some handy tips and hints when it comes to FPL, mainly for me, because I don't always know what I'm doing. So we are delighted this week to bring you a little bit of a, shall we say, coaching session with Jason McKenna, friend of the show, somebody who's been on the previous show quite a few times now. Jason, we wanted to bring you on really and just extract some of that FPL knowledge from that brain of yours to see if you can help our no-nay-never FPL coaches. How are you doing this season? And I guess, you know, what tips can you give to them?
I would say not the best of seasons, but I think, you know, circumstance have to dictate what kind of levels you put onto yourself and expectations, because it's been so weird, so many cancellations, so many postponements. I think there's a few tips that I would give. One of the first things, obviously, for people listening, I work at Premier Injuries with Ben Dinnery, so we do the injury analysis and things like that. And from the start of the season, we've kind of said this week in, week out. Some people have listened, some haven't. Make sure to have really strong benches, because, you know, inevitably we will see a few more incidents where, unfortunately, a game is called off, or somebody's injured, or somebody gets COVID. And so at least you have somebody starting. Maybe they'll only get you 2 points, 1 point, but that's better than no points. And at least you're getting a full 11 out there. So that's one thing that I would say for now until the rest of the season. Yes, it's a bit annoying that you've got maybe wasted money on the bench, but have some starters on there that are definitely going to play. Have a backup goalkeeper as well. You know, really, maybe the thing that is quite different from this season to other seasons is having a healthy bench is key to just even getting 11 players out there, which is the kind of sad thing. The next thing is maybe the chip strategy. Now, I think one of the interesting things from all these cancellations is we have seen an extra free hit, but a lot of people have been using triple captains because of the double game weeks. What I would say is, first of all, wait on your information, wait until, you know, the maximum moment of opportunity right at the end, just before the deadline hits, because you don't want to make any transfers or play one of these chips and then they're gone, and you can't kind of cancel them or whatever. And it's a wasted opportunity there, because games get called off, whatever happens there. Obviously, with a free hit, you have all these transfers, but you might be looking, oh, Liverpool have got 2 tasty fixtures here, and then all their games are cancelled because of COVID. So waiting is an important thing. And also, don't have the fear of missing out. Don't always listen to the crowd in those situations. Play what is best for your team. A lot of people kind of ask me, they ask Ben, they ask other FPL players, oh, what game week should I play, rather than what are the conditions that you would play these chips at. And I think that's the big question, is when is it ready for your team? Is it, you know, really good bunch of fixtures? Do you have enough players playing? Kind of going back to the point, do you even have 11 players playing? You might want to play a free hit just because a few players are out this week, but your squad will be fantastic the next game week. So those are the few of the things that I look forward to. And then maybe finally, save those triple captains for one of these lovely double game weeks. Make sure to kind of have a really good one. But again, save it for the final minute, because Ben and I do a lot of late live streams, literally minutes before the deadline. And that's when we play our transfers, because that's when you have the most information at hand.
Yeah,
you know, one of the annoying things is kind of going, right, I've made this early transfer, I've saved myself 0.1 million in terms of a price rise. But then what have you saved yourself if they're injured, they've got COVID, the game's cancelled? You are then on the back foot against a lot of people there. I know a lot of games are being cancelled last minute, but at least then you can kind of not kick yourself and go, if I just waited a little bit longer, then I would have known. So those are some of my top tips. But do you two have any questions, Dave, Natalie, any players or chip concerns that you have?
I have so many questions about FPL, but I think that's a whole different show. I guess what I was kind of interested in is how this season has differed for you personally. So obviously you've passed on those 3 hints, which is really useful. So I think we've kind of extracted a little bit from you some of the frustrations you've had. But I guess, what have you found the most challenging with this season being like no other?
So maybe linked again to the work that we do at Premier Injuries, but it's the sheer number of injuries and kind of unexpected occurrences. So kind of looking at our data, Ben has done some amazing extractions in terms of total numbers of injuries. They're at record levels in terms of the last 5 seasons, up into the highest levels that there have been. Hamstring injuries, they are at record levels as well. And kind of going month to month, we're just seeing so many. It's linked to COVID sometimes, but it's also people that are genuinely injured. And so I think that's one of the big things that has been the lack of consistency in being able to depend on individuals that maybe you once were able to before. I mean, if you look at Leeds, for example, you would have really fancied some of their players at the start of the season, the likes of Harrison, Rafina, and even Bamford. And you'd kind of hold on to the likes of Rafina, even though he's not injured through the season, and you'd kind of go, well, the other players are going to come back soon enough, or this and that. But that's probably been the hardest thing, is kind of predicting when these teammates will return or when these players will return to those levels. There's just so much problems. I think fatigue has really hit players for 6 this season.
Yeah, I think we can definitely see that. I think most Burnley players' legs look like they stuck in concrete, don't they, Dave? Dave, you must have some questions to follow up from those.
Well, I'm just interested in what Jason said there, because we had a little bit of a tactics chat at the start of the season, and one of the things that Jason said was, don't have people on the bench, get all your money into your starting 11. It's amazing how things have turned around. I mean, I actually took no notice of that at the start of the season, and I packed my bench with players who I thought were going to play. And it's actually turned out that was the right way to do it, probably more by luck than judgment. But I'm not doing as well as Jason. Jason's in our league. I think you're about 30th, something like that, 35th, somewhere around there, doing reasonably well. But I'm not doing too badly.
Reasonably well, 35th. That's amazing.
That's pretty good, yeah. I think my teamed up to about 65th now, so doing reasonably well, but certainly better than previous seasons. And I think I'm taking the gradual approach. I think every season I do it, I think it's about the 3rd season I've done it properly. I've improved season on season. I think that's all you can aim for, really. Try and improve season on season.
I'm in the top 5, right, Anna, Dave? Yeah.
Top 5 out of 5 in our podcast mini league. Yeah.
It's just back to your point, though, Dave. I think it's really good that you kind of call that to attention, because I think, again, maybe going back to Natalie's point, one of the strangest things this season has been adapting. And even more so than usual, one of the things that I don't like generally about football is kind of reactionary kind of mentalities. You know, one player or one team is bad because they've had one bad set of results. But this season for FPL, lots of players have really had to kind of turn about face, react really quickly due to ever-changing information. It's almost an information overload, and you're kind of right there. The old traditional way, which I was kind of employing from last season, seasons before, was have as much money in your team as possible. And then once these kind of worrying bits of data that we've been working on here at Premier Injuries have kind of come to the fore, we went, oh, well, actually, yeah, you do need to pack your benches and everything. So like you said there, Dave, maybe you had the right logic at the start of the season. We should be all listening to you, really.
Oh, no, Jason, don't be saying that to him. Come on. Give me a break. It's taken me that 3 seasons to calm him down. If you start handing that to him, it's going to be a disaster. Poor Dave. No, Jason, that's absolutely brilliant. And I think that's been the key this season. I think it's been incredible that so many of our managers have improved this season. I mean, I know I joke that I'm obviously nowhere near top 5, but it was interesting to hear Dave saying about making improvements. I don't commit the same amount of time as you guys do, just purely because I don't have the time in the week to do it. But I'm really fascinated in the game theory of it. I'm fascinated in the strategy behind it. And one season, I'm going to have some time to commit to this, and I'm going to do really well. But even that, I'm picking up these tips and I'm doing better each season. So I know that our managers will be absolutely delighted to have listened and extracted that advice. So, Jason, as always, it's a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing those pearls of wisdom. And we will drop your details into social media when we publish this post. So guys, do please check out Jason and his team's work. They do amazing stuff and you will not go wrong for listening to that. So thanks, Jason.
Oh, thank you for having me on as always.
Statman Dave's quiz question.
Okay, Dave, no more FPL to talk about. So let's move on to what everybody's here for, what we promised at the outset of the show. And that is, of course, the quiz question. What have you set our listeners this week?
Okay, this week's quiz question is, the Clarets have scored 45 goals in the 22 past matches played between Burnley and Watford at Turf Moor in all competitions. Which Burnley player is the top scorer in these games?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm going to submit my answer as soon as we get off air. So why don't you tell our listeners, in fact, they should know this if they were listening 5 minutes ago, but why don't you reiterate to our listeners how they get in touch and submit their answers, please?
You can tweet us or send us a direct message on Twitter. That's at NoNayNever. You can email us at previewshow@noNayNever.net, or you can also reply to the post for this preview show on either the No Nay Never Facebook page or on YouTube.
Indeed. Well, you're going to need to be very quick to submit your answers this time, as there isn't long between making this episode available and having to record our next episode, which is on Sunday prior to the midweek game against Manchester United. So you're going to have a matter of a couple of days. We're going to reveal the correct answer and anyone who got it right at the start of that United preview show. But finally, let's just finish off with some good community news.
A couple of things from me. First of all, a reminder of people, it's Ben Me Day on Saturday. The ticket offers and the price reductions and one or two other things were to commemorate the fact that Ben Mee has been at Turf Moor, well, permanently at Turf Moor for 10 years, Burnley captain. So that's a special thing for Saturday and a moment for him. But just to say, really, that 2021 was a challenging year for the fans at Turf Moor, with just 2 home wins in league matches against Aston Villa back in January and Brentford in October. This will be our first Premier League home fixture of 2022. And with some sensible ticket offers being available, the ground should be almost full for Saturday's match. We believe it's a sellout or a virtual sellout already. So regardless of what you think about the club's dealings in the January transfer window, we need everyone to put that behind them to give their 100% support for this vital match against Watford. After a solid performance and a point at Arsenal, 3 points against Watford would not only kickstart our season, but would damage the hopes of one of the teams in and around us at the bottom of the table. That's always easier to achieve with a crowd that starts off vocally and stays behind the team for the full 90-plus minutes. The Turf Moor atmosphere can be intimidating for visiting players and fans alike, but we all need to play our part and get behind Sean Dyche and the players, which I'm sure we will. Also, a regular reminder not to forget that the matchday food bank collections for Burnley FC in the community kitchen will also be in place around Turf Moor on Saturday. So remember to bring a tin for the bin if you're able to.
A tin for the bin. Have you just made that up, or is that actually a line for the community?
No, that's a thing. That's the thing. Yeah.
Isn't it
That's
a tin for the bin?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was going to give you a lot of credit for that then, Dave, but okay, you can't have that. Well, that is, of course, all we have time for. So my thanks as ever go to everybody who contributed to making the preview show a success. First of all, to Jason Bailey from The Rookery End for his opposition view. To Jason McKenna also to Jason's this week for his FPL update, which was obviously fantastic and will be of great use to all of our managers. To Turf Moor Stadium announcer Dominic Walker for his specially recorded preview show announcements. To producer Matt, who is obviously the team's MVP always. And of course to Dave Roberts, who puts in a phenomenal amount of work getting the stats ready for your enjoyment, listeners, for no other reason. Last but by no means least, to you, the listener, for downloading and listening to this episode. Your support is very much appreciated, and we would not be here without you. The team will be back on Tuesday with the analysis show, where we are going to rip that band-aid off and dissect the transfer window inactivity, and we're going to celebrate what I'm sure will be a fantastic Watford win. So keep an eye on socials. We'll let you know when that goes live. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and take care of one another. I've been Natalie Bromley. This has been the preview show brought to you by the No Nay Never podcast. Until next time.